Welcome into another edition of Inside Carolina's Postgame. I'm Tommy Ashley. We are sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Go to johnnytshirt.com or Johnny T-Shirt on East Franklin Street. Get all your Carolina swag. And then email Matt at congruityhr.com for your small to mid-sized business assessment. Carolina 68, Wake Forest 59. Wasn't pretty, Rob. Wasn't the best basketball. We can talk about why, but the bottom line is, as much grief as I've given Carolina for being soft and not tough enough, they found a way to handle those aspects of this game, pulled away at late to get to the semifinals of the ACC tournament and beaten Wake. Your overall thoughts?
That's exactly right. I mean, this was the one they didn't get against Michigan State. It was the one they didn't hold on against Florida. And I know that Wake is not as good as those teams, not a Q1 and all that. This was a very, very competitive game. It felt like a big game. It felt like a tournament game. Two longtime rivals representing the old ACC. And that's exactly what it felt like. I mean, there was a lot of physicality, and we'll get into that. But in the heels buckled some. They had a terrible stretch in the second half. And then late, they got it together. They made the better, more poised plays. I mean, Wake was the one that melted down. And, you know, they deservedly got that win. And I think they should get more credit for it than you would think just by looking at Wake's resume.
Yeah, your point about it being an old school ACC tournament game. I mean, it classically was. You had everything. What you did not have is good officiating, but we can talk about that in a minute. But let's talk about the good. Carolina starts out slow, looked a little lifeless to me, not hitting any shots. Wake Forest comes out super aggressive. So when that happens, you have to really fight to get back into the game. Carolina was able to get it picked up. But we got to talk about a player that I thought really stepped up, and that's Ven-Allen Lubin, Rob. I mean, he's the only guy that could handle the physicality of Efton Reed and Spiller down there for Wake Forest. He goes out of the game with 4 fouls, and it's pretty clear that they're going to lose this game if he doesn't get back on the court as soon as possible. Makes a couple huge plays late. Your thoughts on him and how he's sort of come along as the season's progressed and those roles being defined that you talked about a lot all season are finally here.
That's right. I actually thought he struggled for a good portion of the day, just not recognizing his matchup. You know, it's hard for him to score over someone as big as Reed, but he stuck with it. He was much more physical than Washington was. It was not Jalen Washington's day. Lubin was the one who was physically keeping them in there. And then late in the game, he just kept. It's sort of like a running back who's going for 3 yards a pop, and then the opponent just wears down. And I thought some of that accumulation, or to use a boxing analogy, you know, body shots, and you sort of wear out the opponent. And Lubin was, you know, not just scoring inside. He had a couple, you know, the dunks. He had a huge block. And that was maybe his play of the day. Was a game-breaking block and got possession of the ball. His hands were good today. He was setting solid screens. He was getting away with some sketchy ones. Both teams were getting away with a lot. But I thought Lubin's, you know, mental toughness, he was more demonstrative too. You know, he seemed to have embraced, you know, we talked about the rivalry aspects of it. And he seemed to get that, and he responded to it because Wake was ready. And you said it. Wake was chomping at the bit to tear off after UNC, the start of that game. The Heels got right back a little bit, weathered the storm, and then pushed backward, just like you would expect in this sort of contest. But I was very happy to see Lubin come back from some struggles and some missed shots to really play great in those last, you know, those closing few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, a couple times he got the ball. They threw him the ball when he had no shot, and he still tried to take a shot early. But for him to be able to get the follow dunk, get a layup, get that block you talk about, actually get in there and get a rebound when they needed one, I just think that, you know, but for being 6'8", maybe he would be very, very difficult to handle if he were 6'10", 6'11". But he does everything he can do with his size, and he figured it out, to your point. Another guy I thought who settled in, and it's one thing, you know, you look at the stats, only 2 assists, 2 turnovers, 2 rebounds, 8 points. I thought Cadeau was a positive today. You know, there have been times, again, and I'll fall on a sword, we've banged on Elliot Cadeau a lot. He didn't score a ton today, scored 8, which is probably, his average, didn't have a ton of assists, but I felt like he was a calming influence on the floor most of the night, and especially down the stretch.
I thought so too, and I'm glad you mentioned it because Wake was chasing R.J. Davis all over the court. They were hard hedging, they were trapping, and Cadeau was a very effective pressure reliever. It's not always that you have to make a big play, but he was able to get Carolina at least out of the turnover business, and so that other guys could get shots. And I think part of why his assist numbers were sort of modest today is they just were missing so many. But I really like Cadeau's poise. He didn't lose his mind after the couple of the mix-ups. I didn't think that he should have gotten that double foul. That wasn't one where he was reacting or baiting the referees. He just got tangled up. It was the other guy who caused the contact like that. But Cadeau didn't get rattled. I thought he made, he late in the game too. There was a play when he might have had a 2-on-1 break. They didn't need that. And I was like, is he going to try something he shouldn't? But he didn't. So it showed maturation. And I thought he was very solid presence all the way around.
Yeah, and you mentioned the double foul there. I mean, double fouls are just a cop-out, unless it's clearly a double foul, and we know what they look like. And they call it. That gives Cadeau his fourth, and I think Hildreth's third. It potentially can change the game there on those type things. People are asking about the officiating, and I want your take because you're much more level-headed than probably me and a lot of other people. I don't think they were biased, to your point. We were talking off the air. I don't think they're biased. I just think they stink. And I think it's an indictment of the conference. And it's not just basketball, it's in football. And I've covered a lot of baseball this year, and it's been questionable there too as well. But you have to get control of a game early. And my problem with the ACC officiating is that they let a lot of stuff go early, and then they don't call it, or then they call it late, or vice versa. Here we see it's getting chippy. Coach Frederick on the bench can't get that technical. He will say that a million times, but there's not a person in the building that had on Carolina blue that blamed him for that reaction there. But your take about the officiating, the bottom line is good teams beat bad refs in a tight bloodbath of a rivalry game in an ACC tournament. You got to give Carolina credit for fighting through all of it and getting it done.
Yeah, that's right. As you said, I didn't feel like the game was rigged or they were out to get UNC. Yeah. But what happens is, I think they had sort of decided at the outset, we're going to let them play. It's a postseason game. We're going to let them play, and that favored Wake as the more physical team. So in a sense, that Wake is the beneficiary of it because they needed to play that way, or they chose to play that way, and Carolina had to adjust. And then, as you mentioned, the referees try to get control of the game in the second half, and it gets too tight, and it's what surprises the players. I did think the game kind of steadied out in the last few minutes. Both teams, after the tech on Frederick, the tripping flagrant, and they both sort of got it together. I thought the game cleaned up some late. The distinction, I would say, that the only time I've really been upset with the officials in the past 15 years was the Baylor game. In that particular game, the refereeing changed. It was a tight game or normal game that got loose in the second half with one team already having a big lead. And so that one, I was like, no, you changed your style in a way that hurts one team and helps the other team. Here, I thought they came in sort of neutral, like we're not going to call stuff. It just benefited Wake more. But I in general, I tend to be a little less reactive to that stuff because my opinion of officiating across the board is that they miss a lot, and especially ACC referees are just not that great compared to, if you watch other conferences, you see better refs. The Big Ten refs are way better, and this the lack of consistency, not only from crew to crew but from game to game. I think both of those things are problems.
Yeah, and then that's what you end up with. You end up with players that are not sure what they're supposed to do or can do. And then you end up with players also saying, I'm going to foul every time, and they got to call it or they're not. And we've seen some teams play that way in the conference. So, yeah, it's not a bias thing. It's just a consistently inconsistent and bad thing. And, the game I would say that really bothered me as far as watching college basketball, and I felt it was the 2016 national championship game. I think it was Isaiah Hicks' fourth foul late. That was just complete. That changed that game, and that may have decided that national championship. But I digress. Let's talk about this. We're talking with Rob Harrington, North Carolina 68, Wake Forest 59, ACC tournament. What I would consider a first-round game, quarterfinal game, whatever, sets up Carolina and Duke on Friday night in the semifinals. Let's look at a couple more players, Rob. And I thought, Seth Trimble, another struggling night from the field, only 1 for 6, but 8 for 9 from the free throw line, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 turnover. He found a way to impact the game when he's not shooting well. And that is something that's been an issue for some players across the course of the season and in other careers. But I thought Trimble made some boneheaded plays, yes, but to get to the line and make 8 of 9 free throws in a close game, you got to have it. And a vet stepped up and did that too, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, Trimble, I like the way that he battled in the second half. He was one I thought sort of embraced, Wake was inviting Carolina to play very physically, and he said, okay, we can do that. Because he was in there scrapping for rebounds. He was putting his shoulder down and getting to the rim. And I know there's some discussion like, well, Trimble's not shooting well. Why is he getting so many minutes and Ian Jackson doesn't get many minutes? Because Trimble, for that exact reason, Trimble is so much more physical on both ends. And that Jackson has to. I thought he had a tough game, especially defensively. And Hubert Davis seemed to agree. Trimble's our guy, and Trimble really stepped up his effort in the second half. That one exchange where there was a loose ball, I think Withers got fouled ultimately. It was a loose ball on Carolina's end, at the rim where they were shooting. And Trimble was in there scrapping with 2 or 3 Wake guys. I mean, that's the type of stuff you have to have in these scenarios. He's more experienced, so you would hope he would do that. But I was really happy with him. And of course, we have to talk about RJ. This was the 2024 RJ Davis, but it was a very efficient Davis game. And even though he got hot, he took one shot that I thought was sort of heat checkish, but otherwise his shots were in rhythm, and to not to stray too far, but I thought some of that was a result of some real neat play calling down the stretch, to give Hubert Davis some credit, because I think we've been real critical of him at times, rightfully so. But in the final stretch of this game, after that slog offensively, they had a couple of beautiful plays. Davis gets wide open for a 3, which is the exact thing Wake doesn't want to happen anyway, because of a great play call. And then they baited Wake into chasing Davis 30 feet. And then that was one of the lobs to Lubin, beautifully executed. Timing was perfect, really crispy stuff, much better than Wake's execution. Carolina vastly out-executed Wake in the final 4 minutes, and that's how you win.
Yeah, and we got to make sure people understand that, because we've been critical of it, and a lot of people have been critical of Carolina's late game situations. And yes, they ran offense that was effective. The lob was a beautiful play. I love the little, the Cadeau. They pointed it out. I saw it when it happened. The little point of Cadeau to get the ball back to RJ. So it is good for Carolina fans to understand that, yes, it can be done. And sometimes folks know what they're talking about if guys execute it. And we saw it perfectly for Carolina there going down the stretch. They outscored Wake there at the end in a situation, Rob, and we can just sort of transition and we can talk about tomorrow night. But I think this gets North Carolina in the tournament.
Okay.
I think that Carolina is now in, and the Duke game becomes gravy, and it sort of may lift off some pressure. Clearly, you want to play Duke and be ready to go. But I thought that they've done enough to get into tournament, depending on which bracketology you talk to, and I've talked to some that aren't on TV all the time. But you've got a situation where you've got Duke for the 3rd time. We will hear about Cooper Willis-Reed flag a lot over the next 24 hours, and rightfully so. That's a nasty-looking ankle. I clearly would not play. I would sit out and be ready for the NCAA tournament if it were me. And if Cooper, you're listening, that's probably wise to do. But I think a bigger injury, or potentially a bigger injury in the immediate, is Malik Brown getting hurt, because he flat out locked up RJ Davis in Carolina the last time they played and the first time they played. But your take on Duke Carolina 3, Rob?
Yeah, well, first we'll take up the NCAA point. I'm still holding out an opinion until other results come in case weird stuff starts happening with other teams. But I think Carolina, I know it wasn't Q1. It looked like a Q1 to me. And if people were watching it, I hope that they get more credit for it, because they're winning and they're surviving their conference tournament, and it's still postseason, and it's hard to win these games, and other teams are losing. I think Ohio State's now out. Xavier losing was chef's kiss on the day, because that was a key game that Carolina needed to have. I think Carolina and Xavier were kind of competing to be the bad Q1 team that makes the tournament. Xavier's out, Carolina advances. I think they put them out. So they, as of today, I think they're in. Maybe they're even the second to last team in or something like that. And that should go up again. It would be good, even if they can't win tomorrow. Obviously, if they win tomorrow, you're talking about seed. But even if they don't get blown out, say they can maintain their net ranking, whatever the spread's going to be, 10 or 12 points, probably at least, then they have a pretty good argument, I think. And I think that it looks better now than it did 3 hours ago because of Xavier losing. And it looks certainly better than yesterday because of what happened with Ohio State. So I think you're probably right, although I'm not comfortable yet. Maybe it's just my nervous nature. But yeah, I think they will get serious consideration now, no matter what happens tomorrow. And maybe that will be enough. Hopefully it's enough. But of course, it'd be great to punctuate all this with a win.
Yeah, and somebody in the chat said Ohio State, Indiana, Arkansas is going to make the tournament. They're going to get Arkansas in. I'm not really worried about that one. Xavier, to your point, you don't need a bunch of bid stealers to come out of conferences where you've got the lead in the conference has got this tremendous record. They're going to make the NCAA tournament anyway, and then somebody else wins the tournament and gets the automatic bid. So with Arkansas, they're in. With Xavier losing, that all those help Carolina, and now you just need chalk. But Rob, let's talk about Duke, North Carolina.
Yes.
And this is the third time we hear it's tough to beat a team 3 times and all that. I've said all along this Duke team is different and fully healthy. I would say Carolina doesn't have a shot tomorrow, just to be honest. But Carolina has shown the ability to play them tight for a decent amount of time, and then they kind of lost contact in Chapel Hill. Flag plays or not, I think it's a big deal. I think Malik Brown is a big deal for RJ Davis's purpose. But you're sort of scout of this game, given what you saw today from both teams, and then what could potentially be a situation where Duke has to play without a guy that they've leaned on all year.
Well, it's true. And of course, I say that we don't know how healthy RJ Davis will be tomorrow. I mean, who knows if that ankle, it didn't look that bad to me, but he definitely twisted it, and he went down. Anytime they get up and they go back down, it makes me nervous. That's what happened with John Henson in 2012, is I recall him up and back down. Or Oscar Davenport in the first game of the football season way back, he gets up and he goes down. I'm like, and he didn't get back up. I don't think it was that serious, but it could tighten up on RJ, especially because he played 37 minutes or something like that today, and to turn it around, I guess they'll have 28 hours or so between the 2 games. But having said that, if he's okay, the Duke team certainly seems to be more wounded. Thing is, I saw the on-court, off-court with Flag. It wasn't as dramatic as you might think, but Flag is a terrible matchup for Carolina, even beyond just being a great player, a tough matchup for anyone. Losing some of that size, the Brown versatility defensively, you're totally right. He was a game changer in Chapel Hill. I still expect Duke to be a rightful favorite, but the Heels at least should know that they can stay in the game, and can they maintain contact, like you said, and be competitive for 40 minutes. We don't know that. They won't be playing at home, but they also probably will have a pretty friendly crowd. And you're right. I think, they're playing with some momentum. Maybe they have a little less pressure, and it feels like less of an elimination game than it might have. It may or may not be. I think Carolina could win. I think they would need a little help, and they haven't got any help from Duke this season in the 2 games. Duke has shot above their average. They need Duke to have a worse shooting game than usual, just to help them a little bit, and that would give the Heels an opportunity to sort of not get outpaced in scoring. You're going to have a hard time scoring against Duke's defense when they compound that by hitting a bunch of threes. Is just awfully tough hang, and that'll be true for anyone. I feel like they're due to have a bad shooting game. Maybe tomorrow will be it, and then Carolina, playing with more confidence, can stick around this time.
Yeah, a lot of people in the chat, and you're right. Duke has enough players to make up for the loss of a Flag or a Brown. I don't know if they can make up for Brown's defensive prowess, but the issue is if you don't have one of those players, say Flag is not available, and I have no doubt that he'll play. I'd be shocked if he's not playing. Like I said, they'll roll him out Willis Reed style, and we'll hear about it forever. And that'd be a credit for him for lacing them up. But if you don't have a guy like that on the court, then whoever had to guard him, maybe Drake Powell, can slide over and guard Knipple, and then you sort of even out the matchups a little bit, where you don't have guys that can guard them both, and then you can slide Trimble to somebody smaller, Cyan James, Isaiah Evans, or whoever. The issue, Rob, for me is Malwatch. Malawatch in the middle. I mean, we talk about Lubin's game here, and he struggled a little bit early against Efton Reed before he figured it out. Duke's size with Malawatch in there is the anti-Lubin, if we can say that. How big an impact can Carolina have in the paint, regardless of who plays the game, given the big man in the middle for Duke?
I like when he's playing Malawatch, because I think if they can draw him out into all their high screens, they can have some success against him in space. You definitely don't want to do what Lubin did today, which is try to chest up and score over and forget it. But that was also true today against Reed. That should be good training for Lubin after a dominant day against Notre Dame. Wake and Duke are more similar, of course, that in terms of size. I'm less worried about that matchup and more, can Carolina disrupt Duke's offense for 40 minutes? Because Duke has really gotten rolling on them, and Duke hasn't gotten rolling against other teams, but they've really dialed in against Carolina's defense. And the Heels went max effort last game. I mean, no one could criticize their effort last weekend, and they just couldn't maintain it. And so if they can stop them well enough, and Duke isn't quite as hot shooting wise, I think they can get some work done on offense and score in the 70s. Maybe they're going to have to hit threes. Withers has to be back on his 3-point shooting game. We said that going into the last game too. When those shots didn't drop for them last time, you knew they were probably not going to have much of a chance. But Malawatch is an excellent player. I do think that Carolina matches up better with him than some teams, because they aren't trying to feed the post traditionally, which is where he's most effective. And as a jump shooting team, when they're a jump shooting team, that's okay. And I think you can exploit a guy who's a little slower laterally like him.
It's interesting, though. If I remember correctly, in Cameron, Carolina wasn't able to exploit that matchup. In Chapel Hill, they did. How does Duke adjust to that? And then how does Hubert adjust to the adjustments? We've seen, eventually talent and skill takes over, and all the adjustments in the world don't help you. But it's going to be an interesting chess match. Third time, you got a ton of tape on each other, and what you can do against them. Rob, anything left? Anything that we haven't talked about? There's been over 800 people here in the chat, and it is 5:30 on a Thursday afternoon. Shout out to all the Inside Carolina people that they love hearing you talk. So I'm going to give the floor to you and let you close this one out. Carolina advances to the ACC semifinals against Duke, 7 o'clock tomorrow night.
I'll just say this. I was preparing the RJ Davis send-off today, because if they lost, I don't think they would have had a very good chance of making the tournament at all. And I assumed they would turn down the NIT. So I'm glad we're not doing that, because it was awfully fun to watch him. Whatever happens tomorrow, the Heels will get their shot. It is certainly a definite, you make the tournament if you win. We don't know what happens if they lose, but they have this opportunity. I hope they take a swing at the fences and are able to be competitive. You have enough juice left in the tank. They should. I mean, these are young guys. They're not old guys like us. I'm looking forward to it. It's a little less pressure, but it's a Carolina Duke game. And it's another one of these traditional ACC tournament games. And I'm sure we can remember 1989 and 1991, some of those that went the right way, and also 1988, which didn't, of course. And that was a 3-0 scenario, and they're trying to avoid that stuff from happening again. but I am enjoying this week of basketball all the way around. And it's fun to. I know we're getting into portal season, but I am not thinking about that at all. I literally have not thought about portal or NIL one time in the past 72 hours, and I've been very grateful for that. So let's keep it going, and we'll do this again tomorrow night.
Absolutely. That's Rob Harrington. It's interesting. The top of the bracket in the ACC has been your traditional ACC stuff. And then I'll freely admit I didn't watch 1 second last night when you've got Cal and Stanford and SMU and Syracuse playing in the ACC tournament in Charlotte. So it feels like Carolina and Wake Forest and now Carolina and Duke sort of brings back the traditional league if you're so inclined.
Where's the cart that you roll in?
Yeah, where's the
TV? The 27-inch cart, big TV, a big 27-inch TV on a cart. Let's go.
Give me back my tinfoil antennas. Classic stuff. I appreciate it, Rob. That has been Rob Harrington. Carolina wins over Wake Forest to advance against Duke tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. That is Friday night at 7 o'clock. It's the Inside Carolina Postgame, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Shout out to all you guys that have been here. Shout out to everybody in the chat. We'll do it again, probably 9-ish, 9:15-ish tomorrow night on a Friday. Look forward to seeing everybody there. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Tommy.